Good morning. Our guest today is Brian Lazarchick. So Brian, I'd like if you could introduce yourself and tell us what you do and a little bit about your background.
Certainly. So Sonia, Brian Lazarchick, Vice President, Electric Operations and Construction. I've been with the cooperative now for 14 years. Prior to this role, I was actually assigned as the safety director. So heavily safety focused, that's always top of mind. Before I came to the cooperative, I worked as a contractor for the International Monetary Fund and then also for the Justice Department. And immediately before that, I was in the Air Force activity.
Thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So Tom, good morning, Tom.
Yeah, good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here. And Brian, I remember when you started, it was, a few years after I started. So I guess, how have you seen the co-op evolve over your 14 years when you kind of first arrived? And I know you're on the periphery of like storm response and operations because of your safety role. Kind of how have you seen that improvement, I guess, over the years?
So one thing I would like to point out, it seems like whoever has my role tries to have different influences in the overall response from operations and construction. However, what I think stands true through the test of time is the SMECO organized way always shines through and reverts back to that. So there may have been nuances where one person may have had an opinion to drive certain dispatchable practices. But as an overall response factor, it all seems to all work back to the most common and effective approach.
Can you tell us, just kind of start at the beginning about how you prepare your team for storm response?
Absolutely. Preparedness is everything, and that starts with weather forecast. So SMECO has access to 2 weather services, and with that, specific meteorologists. Now, obviously, I also compared that to some of the publicly available weather forecasting agencies and try to get the best response to what we think may impact our customer members. With that is pre-planning. Oftentimes, as soon as we start to think that we're going to see the weather risk increase in our service territory, we pull our group together and do a pre-storm meeting. We run through the motions as if it's a tornado or a hurricane, and oftentimes, all for naught, the storm blows through and we have minimum outages. But we'd much rather be prepared than be unprepared for those scenarios.
Right.
So operations is definitely a 24/7, 365, and I commend my team for their dedication.
Great.
So when you're monitoring those weather forecasts, what are some of the key things you look for?
Winds, number one. As you may know, the majority of our outages during storms are from trees. It's like 70+%. And from that further is trees outside of our right of way or trees that aren't typically within our trimming purview. So anything that we know is going to affect trees. Icing is another one. For those that were around 1994 ice storm is like the lore of a SMECO history. Very heavy wet snow has a very similar fashion to bringing down conductors, cross arms, trees. Most recently was January 2022 Winter Storm Freedom, which impacted a significant portion of our service territory.
Yeah, it did. I remember it.
Yeah.
We were in the storm room for a long time.
Yeah, we were. Definitely.
And I think that was very soon after you had just become CEO.
Yeah, not too. That was probably the first major storm afterwards.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful for the public to know that the different time of year, too, and how the trees may be in full foliage or they may have already lost their leaves, may have an impact. I know another big thing is whenever we get a lot of wind after a lot of rain, that's also because the ground's so saturated, those trees are more susceptible to falling over. So are those kind of things that you factor in as well?
Yep. We got to look at the time of the year. I mean, we all know what Maryland weather starts off in January, still potential winter precipitation with the ice and the snow. As it gets later into spring, now we're mostly concerned about the heavy wet snow. Right after that, as we've been experiencing in February and into March, It's just constant winds. And after that, the next chapter is going to be significant thunderstorms. And then after that, we have the potential for hurricanes on the East Coast, followed into the winter, which just repeats itself with winter precipitation.
So what do we do, like during the year when there's not storms? Talk about our tree trimming program and how that works and how that helps.
Yep.
Storms.
So SPECO has a cyclical tree trimming period of 4 years. We make sure that every circuit on our system is addressed and trimmed, mowed, and sprayed on a 4-year cycle. In complement to that, we also have service crews that go out and do kind of like hotspot trimming based upon either customers calling in and reporting concerns with trees on their property, fellow employees just driving throughout the territory and recognizing the hazards that the trees pose. And also a new technology advancement we made in the last year is we're starting to use our data analytics to identify some of these off-cycle hotspot areas based upon previous outage performance.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, and how would a customer who's maybe driving along and they see a tree that may be leaning over a power line or has a question, what would you recommend them to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Call into SMECO's customer care center, report that. We're more than happy to go out and look at every hazard or concern. I don't want people to try to take on vegetation management on their own. There's a significant risk and threat of coming within a close proximity to our overhead lines. And that goes into effect for underground conductors as well. Please call into this utility before you dig, every time you dig.
Speaking of the tree trimming, I don't know if we want to mention the incident that happened recently in our service territory. Not one of our employees, but just to reiterate how dangerous it is to do tree trimming around electric lines. You know, there was a public contact just a couple weeks ago.
Correct. Yes. Heavy in all of our hearts. The initial response team that showed up from safety, our service crews, and our forestry division, it just continued to counsel them as they had to endure some of those graphic scenarios. In this case, a private tree trimmer was hired to do some tree trimming for a landowner, and unfortunately his climbing equipment came into contact with one of our single-phase overhead tap lines, and that's 7,200 volts to ground, unfortunately resulting in a fatality of that private tree trimming.
Yeah, certainly emphasizes the safe work practices that you preach, I'm sure, to all of the crews that we have. And what's the main message you have to all of the SMECO line crews and our contractors during a storm? I mean, what do you kind of emphasize whenever they go out to start, working on outages, whether it's just after a thunderstorm or after a hurricane?
Safety, and with safety goes hand in hand with communication. Communication from the most senior employee on the job to the most entry-level employee on the job. Everybody has to have a firm understanding of what they're about to do before they perform any action. Obviously, electric utility work, especially storm restoration, is one of the most highly hazardous occupancies in the United States.
Yeah, and when you're in that operation center and we have 10,000, 20,000, maybe up to 30, 40,000 customers without power, walk us through that process that you go through. How do you decide what gets turned on first or where crews get dispatched, and kind of educate those of us, those who are watching, on how that process works?
Certainly. So we try to get the most customers on as safely and as quickly as we possibly can. So our main focus is hitting our transmission lines throughout our service territory, and transmission lines then feed substations. We then try to energize any substation outages as quickly as possible. Then stemming out from every substation are our circuit feeders, which are typically three-phase lines that feed different parts of communities.
Those are the ones that you see along major highways,
Yes.
above ground, right?
Yep. And then after our feeders are our tap lines, and then lastly are our secondary lines going into individual houses. So you can see at every level, transmission lines hit many towns, stations hit parts of a town, feeders go a smaller level, tap lines hit maybe just a street, and then that last service goes to the individual house. So that's the method we try to follow.
I think it's good for the public to know that because, we get calls like from somebody who might be at the end of the road and there's only 2 or 3 people on that line, and they're like, when am I going to get my power back? So I think it's really important that the community know that we work from what gets the most customers back on first.
But also want to emphasize, when your power goes out, definitely use the app, call in, make sure you report your outage. We do have on AMI infrastructure throughout our service territory, but still don't rely on the meter communication.
Right.
We want to ensure everybody's lights get back on, so we want to make sure everybody's reported as they come in.
I know that's one of the evolutions I've seen in my career here at Smecco, that we have the ability to report an outage through an app. And I think what's also very helpful is our outage map that that everybody can see in terms of where the outages are, how many there are, and even to the point where trucks are dispatched. So talk a little bit about the outage map and kind of how that serves as a tool for our customers.
Yeah, anybody can log in through the outage map from our website. You can download the app and review it from there. As you open up the app, there's different filters that you can select, but it's basically a heat map per se of our service territory. There's color-coded regions that show where the current outages are. It will tell you when the outage was initially came into operations. It will show you the current status and even a projected ETR. And a disclaimer, if we have a major outage event that we presume that the outage restoration may go in past 48 hours, we disable individual ETRs and establish global or zonal ETRs.
Estimated time of restoration.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always helpful.
Yeah. I was looking at the outage map this morning, and there was just a couple outages, but it had the ETR on there as well. I remember the first big storm that I worked after I came to work here. I came here in 1999, and I lived in Calvert, and we had a big outage. Okay, so the ERP or whatever version it was called at the time required a management person to be at each one of the offices. So I got voluntold to go to Calvert office. And I just remember walking in there and all these paper tickets are everywhere. All these paper outage tickets, you remember?
Yeah.
And you might have 5 outage tickets for one house just because they keep calling in and the ticket would reprint. So it was just, we've come a long way from paper outage tickets to where we are today.
Yeah, the sophistication and technology in our operations and dispatch center, I can't imagine how storms were managed pre the centralized operations and OMS.
It was crazy.
Outage management system.
Yes.
Because and then combining that with our AMIs, with the metering infrastructure, now the outage management system will see all the outages, group them down into grouped incidents, which may be a feeder outage. So in that case, prior to OMS, a feeder outage may have had several hundred tickets. And
Right.
now an operator just sees one incident that they can manage. And as you know, our linemen all have tough books in the field. So they're instantly updating the status of the outages, running them through, and just much quicker response and restoration. Yeah.
Yeah, technology plays such a big role, but yet there's also that human element that we can never get away from. And I think it's so helpful when we hear stories of when our Smecco trucks roll into a neighborhood, and it may be after an hour, or maybe after, overnight, when folks have been out of power, and they're so grateful most of the time when our trucks roll in, and our guys who are out there responding are very appreciative of that. So when you kind of think about your role, Brian, as in charge of that restoration, what kind of keeps you going and motivated, and what gives you the most gratification in your job?
I could tell you the dedication of every SMECO employee, especially within my division. Obviously, the line, nothing gets done without them. Got to compliment distribution operations. If it's not them dispatching and then running the jobs through, then the linemen don't get the information or the jobs.
And these are men and women working in an operations center. This staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. And so, they're either taking calls from emergency services, they're doing all of the computer work to get those outages assigned to the guys in the field.
Absolutely. And fleet services, every division within my section has a role to help customers' lights get on as quickly as possible. We have support services. We have our troubleshooters or our servicemen that go out. I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's really a combined group effort. And what they all share is their commitment to the community. They live in the community. They're coaches. They're on volunteer fire departments. It's really that co-op difference that really jumps out and honestly is contagious.
Right.
Is why I'm still at SMECO 14 years later and intend to end my career.
We're glad you are.
Yeah.
That's another thing about when these guys go out into a storm. They may be leaving their family at home in their house with no power. Well, they go and put other people's power on. So they are a very dedicated group of men. Maybe one day we can say men and women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, the sacrifices that they make do not go unnoticed. And it's not just our employees, the families that they leave behind. We understand the sacrifice that wives, children, parents have to endure while their loved ones are safely providing reliable power to Southern Maryland.
Right. I remember doing catering too in some of the bigger storms where we would cater, bring meals in for the guys when they come out to go rest, and they could eat before they went home.
Yeah, again, accolades to you could pick any department in SMECO. In that case, I know HR kind of leads that front now for meals, but as we mentioned so much, the technology that involves IT is a crucial part during storm restoration as well to make sure all systems are up and running.
And we can't leave out the contact center because they're taking the calls from the customers too. So
yeah, it's certainly an across the co-op effort. I mean, everything from keeping the Facebook page updated to keeping the outage map updated. We're trying to always communicate with those of us, with those out in the community to give them an idea. And oftentimes we can't say exactly when it's going to be back on because we don't know the nature of the outage, but we can try to give them a good sense of how long they may be out. And I think that's what people have come to expect, because then if they have someone who needs to have power at their house for oxygen machines or CPAP machines, those types of things, they can go and maybe stay at a friend's house or a hotel room or something. So we always strive to give people the best and most up-to-date information. And I think that's a big message that I think is helpful for people to hear, I think.
yeah.
So,
And then you're the one who takes the calls from like the county commissioners, the
Sure,
PSC and the reporters and all those go through you.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, and I've been very fortunate over my time here that I've been able to sit side by side with Brian or his predecessors when they're making decisions on where crews are, so that I have the most up-to-date information when we can try to communicate that out. And so it's certainly, if I can take some of those calls away from Brian and his team, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So they can concentrate on the storm restoration. So
Yeah, one thing I definitely got to give you accolades for was getting SMECO back into the Virginia, Maryland, Delaware Association of Electric Co-ops. With that, it gives us mutual aid resources that we previously did not have.
Right.
And there have been small summer thunderstorms that have rolled through the last year and a half where we've reached out to the VMD and every request they have fulfilled. And this actually provides a better cost to our customer members because we don't have to have additional staff fully employed or have additional contractors on site. It's as you need them, call up the VMD, get mutual aid.
Can you explain to the viewers what mutual aid is?
Mutual aid is where we call on to other co-ops where they would send resources that they have because they may not necessarily be hit with the same storm. So with that, they would try to get the equipment and resources that we need to us. And then when we're done, we would release them back.
And then we also provide that same mutual aid to the Virginia cops as well. And we were, earlier this year, I think we even went down into North Carolina when Hurricane Helene came through.
And Georgia. Yes.
And Georgia,
as
yes.
far as Georgia this past year.
Right. And then the big hurricane down in southern Florida where LCEC, yes.
Yeah.
We sent some management people down there. They didn't need crews, but they needed other help, like warehousing and that sort of thing. So that's what I love about the co-ops. You know, we're all about helping each other, and it's just I think it's a great business model.
Absolutely. It's great when you see those other crews from others, from Virginia. And I remember during the derecho that we had and the Hurricane Irene, when we had that was the biggest one I've ever worked.
That was months after I was hired.
Oh,
yeah. And I mean, you just see these guys roll in, and the brotherhood that exists among the linemen from SMECO, and then their brothers, I like to say, from other states, when they come in and they attack the problem together, they almost kind of speak their own language, which is fun to watch.
This is a fun aside with the mutual aid, is it also allows the different co-ops to see how each co-op either has different equipment, different tools, or even different work practices.
Right.
And there's just that constant best in business, how we can restore power.
Right. So we've talked about storm restoration. What about, I get a lot of questions about, there's nothing going on today. Why did my power go out? So maybe you could talk about, what other things happen, like, getting into substations or, pole cutoffs and that kind of thing. What's the most popular reason that someone might have an outage on a blue sky day?
So honestly, it's planned work. Where we give advance notice, and either SMECO or its contractors are doing work. So we don't count those as outages because we give customer members advance notice. But following, again, trees outside of the right-of-way is number one, trees inside the right-of-way is number two, planned work is number three. Number four is going to be, and those are like 70%, 60%, 50%, and then it drops off for the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Underground cable failure is a common one, depending on the time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
If there's very heavy, wet, saturating rains, the underground jacketing material could essentially break down and lead to a cable failure. I've also heard when the first frost hits, it could lead to underground cable failures.
And then we have our friends, the squirrels and the snakes.
Snakes, yep. There's a lot of squirrel funerals that go on.
And birds, of course. Yes.
And as you said, equipment or vehicles striking our poles or pad mount equipment is probably going to be next in line.
Mm-hmm.
And then last, I would say general equipment failure, whether that's an insulator breaking down, any type of other equipment failing.
And we want people to call in those outages as well.
Absolutely. We often hear my lights are off, but my neighbor's lights across the street are on. And that's just depending on how the circuits run through. And there could be some switches open where we're trying to restore as many people on as we can while repairs are made. But it also makes sure that everyone reports their outages that you experience.
This has been great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the customer member interaction often happens with SMECO during storms, and whether they're calling in an outage or they're seeing our workers out there doing restoration, I think that's the best example of kind of what we do. And so credit to you and your team for all the work that you do for that. And it makes us all proud, really.
It does. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for being on today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.